Hello and welcome to Lunchtime Live presented by the Wild Center. My name is Morgan and I am a museum fellow with the Wild Center focused on animal care. Although you might not be able to visit the Wild Center right now, we're trying to still bring you educational content to bring the Wild Center right into your home. Today I'm going to be talking to you guys about herping, which is just a verb we use to describe searching for amphibians and reptiles. When you go out herping, one of the key things that you need to consider is safety, both for yourself and for the animals. Herping typically involves going off trails because a lot of herps aren't going to hang out actually on the trails where a lot of people are passing through. They're going to want to really keep to themselves. Because of this, you really have to consider what you wear to go out herping. Make sure that you're wearing a long sleeve shirt to protect your arms, long pants to protect your legs, and closed-toed shoes to protect your feet. It's also useful if you wear waterproof shoes, as this is going to help if you go into creeks or go into more wet environments where you're typically going to be able to find a lot more herps. Though herps are extremely cool creatures, we want to make sure that we're not handling them too much. Because they are wild animals, they are going to see us as predators, and therefore we want to make sure that we're not stressing them out too much. Just because we might not associate their behaviors with signs of stress that we see in ourselves or pets doesn't mean that they are necessarily comfortable. In order to make them as comfortable as possible is to limit our handling time, if even handling them at all. If you do choose to handle them, make sure you're keeping an eye on them to monitor these signs of stress. If you're taking little ones with you, make sure to keep the safety of the animal at the forefront of your mind. Use your best judgment when it comes to handling. It might be better to have them only use one finger to touch the animal when you're handling it, or even better, just look. We don't want any creatures getting thrown, stepped on, or squished accidentally. Now, as we've covered, herps include amphibians and reptiles. Although we need to be careful with all wild animals and domesticated that we handle, we need to be especially careful with amphibians. Now, one of the key differences between amphibians and reptiles is their skin. While reptiles have very scaly and rough skin, amphibians have very soft and slimy skin. That means that the amphibians have very permeable skin to allow water and gases to travel through it very easily. This also means that whatever is on your hands when you touch an amphibian, it's going to travel through that amphibian's skin. We need to be very careful not to wear any perfumes, creams, lotions, any of that kind of thing on our skin before we handle. So you want to make sure that you wash your hands and make sure that they're as clean as possible for handling. We don't want them getting any unfamiliar chemicals into their system, which could potentially be very bad for them. Amphibians also need water or a moist environment to survive. Make sure that you always bring a water bottle with you, not only for yourself, but also for the amphibian. It's really useful to actually wet your hands before you handle amphibians so that you don't dry them out too much. It's just another good safety feature and something to get in the habit of. Now, it's best to use a natural water source that's going to be around you, but if you don't have one of those, having some water on hand always helps. Now that we've covered some of those safety procedures, let's go herping. Both reptiles and amphibians are what's known as exothermic, means that they do not produce their own heat like us humans and must instead get their heat from outside sources like the sun. On sunny days, you'll often find some reptiles and amphibians laying out in the sun. A lot of aquatic creatures, semi-aquatic like many turtles, will actually be found basking on logs. And snakes that you might be able to find in forests will actually be found in the little the sunny spots.
So notice that the rocks that I'm going to look under, they're right by this water source, right by this creek, which is going to be a very good habitat for a lot of herps, especially a lot of amphibians, because they are going to want to be by these wet, moist places. So having that water source nearby kind of ensures that the soil underneath these rocks is going to be very moist and pretty much the ideal habitat for them.
Now, when you're picking up a rock when you're going herping, or a log for that matter, you want to make sure that you pick up the rock towards yourself. That just ensures an extra barrier between you and whatever's under that rock. So we're going to pick this up like this and just point it towards ourselves. Oop, and we have a salamander right here. So as we've covered before, you want to make sure that your hands are wet before you do any handling with the amphibians. So I'm just going to unscrew my water bottle a little bit and then get some water on my hands. And that's just going to ensure that I don't dry them out. So here we have a little salamander. I believe this is a northern redback. You want to make sure not to grab them too tight and kind of just like cup your hands so that they can't crawl out and accidentally fall. So I want to make sure not to handle him too much. So I'm just going to go ahead and put him back. That's because he was exhibiting some signs of stress, you know. Obviously he was moving around a lot in my hand. Also he's an amphibian, so I don't want to dry him out too much. So yeah, I'm just going to put him back, and notice that I put him back exactly where I found him. And then I'm going to move this rock right back on top. Now I want to make sure not to smush him at all, but I do want to put it exactly where I found it. So here, I'm just going to flip this rock right back over. I'm going to make sure not to smush him in the process of it, but I still want him to be covered by this rock. Now remember, a lot of the creatures that we're going to be looking for are going to be on the ground. They're going to be near tree trunks, under rocks, near creeks, on or under logs. So when you're walking through the forest or wherever you're going to be walking through, make sure to keep an eye on these places, you know? Don't be looking just like up at the trees the entire time or straight ahead, because you might miss something that's right in front of you or right to the left of you. This being said, also make sure that you're seeing where you're going. You don't want to run into a tree or anything like that. So now that we've looked at where and how to herp, I'm sure you're going to be able to find some really cool critters in your area. But what do you do when you find them? Depending on where you are in the world is going to really depend on what type of herps you can find and also what type of herps to look for. So some places, like a lot down south, there are going to be a lot more lizards that you can find. Currently I'm in the northeast, so there's not a whole lot in that department. There are some skinks, but I have yet to come across any. The main things that I am looking for, the main things I am most likely to find are probably going to be the salamanders, frogs, and snakes, among some other things. So before you go out herping, that's just kind of a key thing to do. I recommend investing in a field guide if you don't already have one. There are also some very good online sources that I've used before for places that maybe I don't have a field guide for yet, because they're a different area of the country. I can just go to these online guides and use a picture that I've taken in the field. So that's another really good point, is that make sure that you have either a camera with you or your phone to take pictures of all your finds. That way that you are limiting the handling time, you're not handling them too much, and you can just grab them, snap a quick pic, or you can leave them where they are, snap a quick pic, and kind of observe them in that natural habitat. Write down some, things that you notice if you want to. That's always really nice for a nature journal. And then you can go back later when you're at home on a laptop or buy some books, and you can actually look up what kind of species that was. I find it also useful to have some kind of measuring guide. So I'll either have like my hand out right beside them, or if they're in my hand, that's also helpful. Just so that you kind of get an idea of how big they were. So I did come out to herp here actually a few weeks ago. We had some very nice weather. I was able to find some salamanders, mostly the red-backed ones. However, I also was able to find a new species I have yet to be able to identify. And I also was able to found a red-spotted newt, which is a subspecies of the eastern newt, and it was in its red F stage. And those are extremely cool creatures. Basically, they are born in the water, like most amphibians. And they then transition to land creatures, and basically they look like a little reddish orangish lizard, and they live on land for a few years, and then they go back to the water and transition back into an aquatic form. I also was able to find a garter snake, which was very cool, and one of the key things I found was that I had been looking for a snake all day, but as soon as I stopped, I sat down on a stump and I looked up and there was a snake right in front of me. So it just kind of goes to show that if you stop and wait, look around, I'm sure you're sure to find something. Thanks for joining me today. I hoped you learned a little bit more about herping. I encourage you to get outside in your own backyards and look at the reptiles and amphibians in your area. We hope to see you in the future at the Wild Center. Until then, have a great day and stay safe.